Hey guys, welcome to an episode of the Apex Youth Ambassadors podcast series. So today we'll be discussing Asian representation in the media. I'm Christopher Liu and I use he, him pronouns.
My name is Aria Hussein and I use she, they pronouns.
I'm Davalynn and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Emma and I also use she, her pronouns. Hi everyone, my name is Ruhshona and I also use she, her pronouns. And we'll start it off with our personal experiences with Asian representation in media. So what's the first Asian representation you've seen in American culture?
If I really had to be honest, I don't know what's the first representation I've seen in the media, but I will talk about one of the most memorable South Asian representation I've seen in the media. And I say memorable not in a good way. It is absolutely not positive because I guess one of the most memorable South Asian representation I've seen in the American culture is the film Extraction. It is a Netflix film, and the protagonist was starred by Chris Hemsworth, I believe. And I mean, I say it is not in a positive way because I mean I feel like the movie is like a walking stereotype of a Bengali Bangladesh, because I mean a majority of the films that we see in the media of South Asian representation, it is you guys know the sepia filter, the yellow filter. They wash that entire film in sepia filter, and I felt so sad because I mean Bangladesh isn't yellow. I mean it has so many colors other than just being yellow, and they represented Bangladesh as this dusty yellow drug lord terrorist filled country, and a Western man needs to go there to save someone who got kidnapped by one of the drug lords. And just seeing that broke my heart, because I mean not only me, a lot of other Bengali people, they were really excited about this film, because when they heard that Chris Hemsworth was coming to Bangladesh to shoot this film, they were all very excited, because I mean Chris Hemsworth is very popular and stuff, and he's pretty cool, you know. So when they heard about him coming to Bangladesh to film that thing, everybody was generally excited. But when the film came out, we were all so disappointed, because I mean Bangladesh isn't like that. I do recognize that there are gang violences in Bangladesh, but it is not the only thing that's present in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is filled with so many good cultures. I mean, I'm a Bengali myself, so I definitely know that. And I mean, that isn't all. I feel one of the worst part is the people who were starred as the Bengali characters in the film, they are Indian celebrities in real life. They aren't in Bengali themselves. And it might be a stretch to say this, but I feel putting Indian people in Bengali characters, they're perpetuating the stereotype that all Bengalis are just Indians. They do not have their separate identity as Bengalis, because there were other Bengali celebrities they could put in place of the Indian characters. And just seeing that I feel that is it is a very common theme in which Bengalis are just Bengali identities are just erased and are clumped into the same umbrella as Pakistanis or Indians. I mean Bengalis, they are their own they have their own identities. They're not Indians or Pakistanis. And I feel one article that I read previously that really talks about this problem is one by one of this blog post by 76 Agency. They're a blogger and stuff. So they say if every white person isn't just British or American, or if we don't talk about them as Italians, or if we don't talk about Italians as French and French as Italians, then why are we clumping every brown person as Indian or American? I mean, it's very it's kind of stupid, if I had to say that. Yeah, so it thinking about it just makes my blood boil, because and the representation hasn't improved, because Extraction came out in 2020. I'm how I mean, if a film comes out and how unwoke do you have to be to just make a film like that? It's kind of weird. I mean, it's 2020, and yeah, and I don't think, I mean, I haven't seen any good representation after that. I mean, I haven't seen anything good after that. So yeah, I don't think the representation has improved since then. But I do feel East Asian representation has seen improvements over the past years though. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like this, almost obsession that Hollywood seems to have over kind of labeling, large swaths of groups as like exotic or foreign. And like you see that with the kind of like the sepia filter that you were talking about, or like, clumping, all Bengalis and Indians and Pakistanis all as like one group just because they don't take the time or the care to, truly represent all of these different cultures and identities and people in a way that is that is actually cognizant of the differences between identities and pays attention to the unique characteristics of each person.
Yeah, like adding on to that, if I call up like a German like French, they're gonna get so mad because
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
because they like, I mean, even despite being white, they like preserve their culture so much, and like they don't want you to call them like any other ethnicity or nationality. But when they call me Indian, I have to like just soak it up and be like, oh, I'm an Indian too. Like, what? What's this double standard?
I know. I mean, I don't think you have to soak it up, but I think it's definitely the case that like there's, like Chris said, like a lot of these clumpings, right? And something that made me think of that is like, I think throughout my whole life, whenever there's like a scene that depicts anything like Oriental, there's always this like random like Chinese music in the background. Like it could be like a scene in like LA Chinatown, and it's like, all these like Chinese American, like Asian American people, and it's just like exotic still. And I think like also this idea,
gong and everything too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, because people are always on the streets, like,
No, yeah,
doing-
but like, do you know those action movies where like there's the main character is like a white guy and then he comes across this Chinese guy who's secretly a martial artist, and then
He's
like
like, "Train me,
Oriental
master."
music plays with like the flute and everything. It's just so. I think also like with the first Asian representation in the Disney shows, it would always be like this random like Chinese like guest character. They were never the main, but it was like a guest just for that one episode for the plot line, and my eyes would always just like direct to them. I'm like, dang, like a Chinese person.
They're always-
Tokenism.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
always there for like the Chinese New Year episode, and then they're
Oh,
never to
yeah.
be seen again.
It kind of reminds me of like Pitch Perfect.
Yeah.
You know how like
Oh yeah.
all of the like Pitch Perfect like girls or whatever, they're white, and then there's like this one token like Chinese girl who has no substance to her, and I think there's like one token like black woman as well, and it's just like they have no character in the movie, and it makes me so upset.
Like their only personality is being that token Asian or
Yeah.
black character.
Yes.
And just kind of bringing it back to like this idea of like center versus margin, which we've talked about, which for the listeners, it's kind of the idea of how even in the Asian representation that exists, you see this kind of divide between people who within the Asian American community have more privilege. And so like those are people like East Asians or men or people of higher socioeconomic statuses, or people who are able-bodied or straight. There's different kinds of intersectional identities that we can talk about. But one of the main things is like, even when you see these like, really one-dimensional token roles, they're taken up by East Asian characters, and you hardly ever see people who are Central Asian or Southeast Asian or are different parts of our Asian American community.
Yeah, I agree. I'm from Uzbekistan, and personally, I have never seen any Central Asian representation in American media. And it goes to show that if Asian Americans that are part of the center aren't properly represented, then there's an unlikely chance of the marginalized groups to be properly represented as well. And I'm glad that there's like a gradual rise in East Asian representation, at least, like which will eventually like make way for more marginalized groups to start being represented, because that's usually how like the pattern goes. Representation starts at the center and then like it gradually moves to the margin. And like, yeah.
So moving on, we're going to talk about a little bit about stereotypes. We kind of touched on this, but are all stereotypes bad, even though they might portray Asians in like a good light? Or like, what do you think of stereotypes, and what are some that like, really stick out to you?
I feel like stereotype itself like kind of implies a negative connotation because you're generalizing like this huge group as like one group and not like diverse like subgroups, I guess. And as a kid, like for example, the model minority, like I never really understood why it was bad because I was like, hey, like people think we're smart, like we're good at math, like what's the issue with it? But then it kind of reinforces like, hey, like all Asians are the same, like these people can't tell the difference between the Asian people. And I feel like sometimes you just kind of want to see someone who isn't perfect, like with straight A's and like not with straight A's and like not good at math. Like maybe they're struggling with something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like one of the negative things that all stereotypes have, it kind of portrays a lack of nuance in kind of the characterization of Asian Americans in this case, but of whatever group is being stereotyped. And so even if it's like supposedly a good thing, whether it's like, really good at martial arts or, crazy good at math or music or whatever, all of those kind of take away from the individual accomplishments of specific people in that group because they're kind of lumped into this, oh, all Asians are this, all Asians are that. And then of course there are the, truly negative stereotypes that, you can't even really say are portraying Asians in a good light. And it's like, those are things like, the kind of like geeky, fresh off the boat, bad at socializing and interacting with other people, that kind of stereotype exists as well. And so it's kind of hard to say like, oh, just because there are these good stereotypes or quote unquote good stereotypes, there are plenty of examples of stereotypes negatively affecting our community and really kind of take away from the individual nuances and unique qualities of each person.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of just relating it back to our conversation, like the characters like Fresh Off the Boat. I think Fresh Off the Boat was definitely refreshing in the light that like it was one of the first like mainly Asian, even though it's kind of just East Asian like cast. And at that, when it came out, what were we like 13, 14, right? And Eddie Huang is what now in like college too. So he like those actors are really our generation, and like the show, I don't know, for me and my family, it was definitely like a good time to watch that show. But at the same time, like looking back at it, you can also kind of tell like what was kind of problematic. But like in general, I think like characters that are generally portrayed as like East Asian or South Asian, like really perpetuate that model minority, like that tokenism, right? And I especially remember in like cartoons that like really slant eye, like Chinese looking boy with like a preppy uniform, like doing math, and like that's the guy that like we're supposed to relate to. And, he doesn't even look like a person, right? And he's, he can't see and all this, and people are always making fun of him. But like, it's supposed to be funny, right? And I think it's like for the enjoyment of the predominantly white audience or non-Asian audience. And then, like because Asian people watch it as well, that they're gonna laugh too. So, it's like, I wouldn't say internalized, but this sort of like lack of understanding, like especially when you're young, that's not what like being Asian is, it's not just like doing math and like having small eyes.
Yeah, I feel like especially with shows, like American shows, it's with Asians in it, it's not exactly like black or white in that it's good representation and bad representation. Often I feel like it's always in the middle. So like with Crazy Rich Asians, I thought it was like pretty refreshing, was funny, like it had a good plot line. It showed like culture, but I wouldn't exactly call that like the best representation, right? Because again, like with the model minority, like I feel like as an effect of the movie, like people just kind of assumed, oh, like all Asians are like this. Like I told you, they all become rich, smart, they make a lot of money and that kind of thing. And I just thought it was like harmful. But like with the movie itself, you can't say like it was completely bad.
Yeah, I feel like at the end of the day, like representation isn't just like black and white. I mean, like I feel like in modern times, the box is always checked for like the representation, but I feel like how being like how accurate or like how good that representation is, I feel like they don't put emphasis on that. They just like, oh, we are putting this character, and yeah, representation stops at that, and they don't care about making it accurate or true to, I guess, representation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I feel like, almost nowadays it's harder to kind of see these stereotypes play out because like you're not going to see, or at least you really hope you're not going to see cases where they're, super blatantly racist, or like they bring in some, guy with yellow skin and slanty eyes and, a bun and something like that. Like you won't see that. But you'll see kind of the stereotypes and the biases leak through in how these characters are portrayed, or what the characters are not given in terms of nuance to their personality, or character developments in these shows and movies and media that we consume. And so it's almost kind of like a subtle thing that you have to see, and something that perhaps manifests itself in kids watching these shows and internalizing these kinds of biases and normalizations that aren't so explicit, but kind of implicitly exist in the foundations of our media.
I guess we can kind of move on to like another sub question is like, what are some stereotypes that like you've listened to, or like things that you grew up with that you like took to be true? Something that you've internalized, and what was your experience with that?
Like, do you mean like stereotypes we've noticed kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I definitely, like we said, model minority, you don't have to need to include this, but I definitely like took that for a really long time to be like, oh, I have to be this person, and then like when I wasn't, it's like the end of the world, right? But kind of understanding now that that's not true is much better, obviously. But like that was something I definitely took to heart.
I guess something I like recently learned about is like the stereotype about like with Asian girls and like a colored streak in their hair, because like I feel like it's pretty new to me, because at first I see in like cartoons, it's wait, what?
I don't know, that is so funny.
What do you mean?
No, because I mean, I feel like I experienced the same thing because of TikTok.
Oh,
I've,
like
I've
do you
seen
mean
it
like
a lot on
learning it
TikTok.
through TikTok?
Yeah.
I guess I kind of got a glimpse of it on TikTok, but it was more like I searched it up online afterwards, and like I read a few articles on that as well. But it's just like you see those girls in the movies, they're like super cool, like they're bad, they're rebellious, they break the rules, they're not like the good Asian kid. And like looking at first I was like, wow, like I want to be this girl. Like I want to dye my hair. I want to look cool. And then but like looking back, I realized there was never like real substance to the characters besides the fact that they broke rules, if you know what I mean. And it's like
Yeah.
they use this like streak because they're kind of saying like, oh, like this Asian character isn't really standing out compared to like the majority that's like a white cast. And it's kind of saying like they can't tell the difference. And like I'm not saying that every Asian girl with dyed hair in media is a bad stereotype, but it's like if you don't develop their characters and you make that their whole personality, like I'm not going to say that's good representation.
I guess one thing that I wanted to add on, kind of talking about personal experiences with stereotypes, is like, the thing that I've struggled with a little bit is I kind of fall into a lot of these stereotypes. And like, I'm an East Asian Chinese guy who really likes math. I played piano for a while. I do my homework, get good grades. Like
Yeah.
I do all of those. I do martial arts. And so like, if you had to find kind of the stereotypical Asian guy, it might look a lot like me. And so kind of where do I fit in with that? And so like one of the things that I've kind of grappled with is feeling like, you know, an individual who has unique qualities, and like, you know, I like math because I enjoy problem solving or whatever. Like it's not like because I'm Asian or because I'm Chinese. And so it's kind of like, even though I fit into like model minority and Asian stereotypes, like I don't want to be seen as those stereotypes because of this, because of the stereotype. But I want to kind of be my own person and have like these unique characteristics that, you know, sure, they happen to coincide with these kind of preset two-dimensional or one-dimensional characteristics, but I want to be seen with them as myself and not as the, like, you know, just standard Asian starter kit.
Yeah, I definitely get what you mean, because like as a kid, I grew up like liking like Asian shows and like Asian music, like K-pop and like, you know, anime or just like Chinese shows, that kind of thing. And like I thought about it before. It's like, do I like these things because I'm Asian and it's like my whole personality kind of thing, or it's like my personality that causes me to like these things? And then that was like this dilemma like I kept thinking about. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever know, because it's like, again, like being Asian is a part of my identity, but like it's not like my whole like personality.
So now we're going to move on to talking about the kind of like rise in East Asian culture in the media, especially in American media. So what do you guys think?
I mean, while I do love myself some K-pop and anime, like I love them. Like, because I mean, yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean, yeah, so I think, I mean, I have like in my community and in my life, I have like well, I have enjoyed myself some East Asian culture because I like anime and I like K-pop, but I feel like while that is a good thing, I feel like because of the like explosion of East Asian culture all over the world, people are kind of I don't know, I would say East Asians, because I feel like after like K-pop exploded, people have started to think that Asians are just like this fancy person, which is not like, I mean, it's not accurate, because Asians are like this huge diverse group of like South Asian, Central Asia, and then Southeast Asians, and I feel like a really good like I wouldn't say good, like a really like negative negative experience that I've like that I've like faced in social media, like I like as social media and in real life, is that some people like they just forget that South Asians exist, and then they lump them into like I mean middle they like I remember in like health class, like one of the girls in like my class, we were like just talking, and then I said like, oh, I'm Asian, and then she goes like, weren't you like Middle Eastern?
So that's so out of
Oh
pocket.
my god.
Oh my.
And then the fact that Middle East is also in Asia,
Yeah.
like just and then I was like, no, I mean, I was like, okay, it's okay to be like, I mean, and then I told her that, but then I told her that, okay, Bangladesh exists in South Asia, it's not Middle East, but like, she still doesn't believe me, so I guess, I guess she needs to like, I don't know, Google it or something, but yeah, other than that, like, I've also like in social media, I've seen like people call like Indians not Asian, like they call them, oh, you're not Asian, you're something else. And then it's kind of annoying, because I mean, while at the same time it is great that East Asian, like, I mean, there's been like so much like there, like East Asian culture has been so popularized in media, I feel like people are like forming this image that only East Asians are Asian and there are not other images of Asia.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, okay, this made me think of something. I have a classmate who is Indian, and he said to me like Southeast Asians like aren't Asian. Like, okay, let me clarify. Okay, so like basically like there's, I think like in his mind it's gotten to such a point where like East Asians and Southeast Asians and like Central Asians are like so different based on like cultures and just like, especially in America, like the way that we're portrayed, that like he's like, whenever we say like Asians, right, he's like, you mean East Asians, right? Because I think that's definitely true. Like when a lot of people say just like Asians, it just usually refers to like East Asian culture. But like, what is your take on that, Aria and Ruhshona? Because like, I was like, I mean, you're not Asian. Like don't say you're not Asian, because I feel like that's just not true. But like, he was definitely like adamant about like the separation of like the two terms, just because he feels like it's gotten to a point where like they are like they can't be put in the same group, because obviously like East Asian culture and South Asian culture are like quite different. So what do you think?
I feel like, I mean, while I do consider like both subgroups like to be Asian, I feel like when we are talking about like Asians, we should like specify.
Yeah,
I guess to like just avoid the confusion.
Yeah.
Because I feel like nowadays, whenever we hear the word Asian, like, I don't know, I think we are all like conditioned to think of the East Asian picture.
I feel that.
So I feel like it would be best for like both parties to just like specify which direction they're talking about. So yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say, I had a story similar to Aria. So I used to tell people I'm Asian, and they're like, "But you're white."
Oh my god.
And then I had to specify, like later on, that I'm actually Central Asian. They're like, "Oh," and then yeah, I feel like we have to specify what part of like Asia we're from.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of like one of the issues that comes. I mean, like Asian people are like, I think they're like the majority of the people in the world. And
Yeah,
so
they
like,
are.
you know, it's such a huge swath of the global population that, you know, like everyone else who's not Asian, they're split into, you know, all of the different kinds of categorizations that you can make. But like Asians are kind of like grouped into this huge clump of people that takes up, you know, more than half of the world. And so I think it would make sense that you kind of see different subgroups coming out of that. But, you know, we're still all Asian. We're in the continent of Asia. And so, you know, there's different kinds of levels that you can make there, whether it's, you know, talking about all Asian people together, because there are definitely similarities between us and similarities in the ways that we interact with kind of the broader culture and the broader society, especially in the United States. But then there's also, you know, differences that we've talked about, kind of the differences in the ways that East Asians are perceived and South Asians are perceived and Central Asians are perceived. And so there's kind of different levels to that. And so like the risk of, you know, labeling the entire Asian community as kind of like a monolith or this, you know, one-dimensional group of people who are all the same is that you lose all of the differences between each person within what is now like 4 billion people. Like there's like a huge variety in that.
Yeah, I think that connects back to what we said about lack of non-East Asian representation, because when Americans think of Asians, they just have one picture in their mind. And for that to change, there needs to be more non-East Asian representation in media. So
I feel like it's not just like media in general, because I feel like you can find good representation. It's just not in American media, if you know what I mean. Like if you can find like an example is, I think a good representation of like, let's say Chinese culture would be like a Chinese movie. And while I can appreciate that aspect, it's they can't exactly capture like what it means to be like a Chinese American, right? Like, and it's the combination of cultures. And so like with American media, it's like, hey, like I don't see any like Asian aspect at all. But then it's like with the Asian media, like I kind of just watch because like American media doesn't represent me. I still don't feel like content.
Yeah,
you know?
that's such a cool point that you made, because I feel like while I do know Bangla, I feel like I do not know Bangla to the point that I can understand like native Bengali people's like media. So I feel like when I go to like when I like go back to my country and then like see these media of like Bengali culture, I don't like I don't know. I don't really feel much representation there because I feel like my American side of me is like it just doesn't relate. But then if I go to America's, like if I go to American like representation, I don't see my Bengali side like agreeing with it. So it's like so there's like this collision. So I don't know how to like fix it. So
Yeah, I feel like again with the rise in East Asian culture, like a popular movie was like, well, in America was like To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Like I don't know if you guys heard of that movie. And while it was like a pretty fresh take on like, hey, this Asian American like in a rom-com and it's not about something oriental looking or sounding or whatever, they didn't really like make her Asian identity like a part of the movie, I feel like. And while it was like funny and fresh, like, and they tried to capture both and they did not succeed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I actually like that made me think of what's her name, like London. What was that?
Oh yeah. From
What's that Disney
Sweet
show?
Life.
Yeah, Sweet Life.
Yeah.
I was like obsessed with that show. And like I think a big thing was like this idea that of like assimilation, you know, like
Yeah.
like London and like whatever Lana Condor's role in To All the Boys I Loved Before is like, oh, she's like just like a regular American girl, right? And like I think there's nothing wrong with that because I'd say that's definitely like an experience of a lot of people, but like I don't know, it was just kind of like ironic. I don't know, like because this idea that oh she's like this great you know example of representation, but it wasn't in like a cultural way, you know, it was just
I know you mean,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and I think it's like to me that was sort of refreshing in itself, that is like oh you know she like these Asian people don't have to play the role of someone cultural, right? Like they can just play a regular role, right? That doesn't have to do anything with their heritage. That yeah, who knows.
I guess kind of just bouncing off of that, I have a question for all of you guys, right? Like there's kind of different levels of how you can have Asian representation in media, right? So there's kind of the part that we were just talking about where you kind of almost ignore it or pretend that it doesn't exist. And I feel like that's not ideal, right? You don't want to have someone who's like completely whitewashed and all of their heritage is kind of stripped away in the name of assimilation to American culture or whatever that is. But then there's also kind of the, you know, hyperfixation on the culture that I feel like it kind of takes away from the individual personality of a person, right? Because like if you're only talking about their cultural heritage, then you're not talking about, you know, their interests or their personality or the kind of person they are, or, you know, all of the other things that exist in a person other than their cultural background. And so is there kind of an ideal spot where you have the right level of, you know, cultural appreciation or cultural understanding for these characters, but not, you know, going too far or hyperfixating on those things? And if it does exist, where would that line be? Or if there's like a region or something like that?
I feel like again talking about how representation isn't always like black and white, like it's not always good or bad. I feel like obviously it depends on like the plot line, right? But if you're trying to portray like this normal like Asian girl or something, it would obviously be in subtle ways, like how your culture affects your life, right? Like maybe it's like the things you eat for dinner, the way you talk to your parents, like it can be like subtle, nuanced things like that. But then if it's like ignoring it would be like just assuming like what's her name? Lana Condor and To All the Boys I've Loved Before, where it's like it like doesn't affect her at all, then that's just kind of ignorant, you know?
yeah, I feel like a really good representation of how the balance is achieved of like not making the entire thing like Americanized, but also not making the entire thing like too focused on the native culture, like to the original culture, is like Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. I feel like in that book, like he really like does a good job at representing like Afghan culture, and like he like since he's like Afghan American, like he just like he immigrated to Afghanistan like after the Soviet Union occupation of Afghanistan. Sorry, he immigrated to America after that. So I feel like he really does a good job of like representing the American experience of his and also the Afghan experience of his, because I feel like whenever like I mean most of the Western world, whenever they think of Afghanistan, they always think about terrorism or like Taliban, which is not a good representation of Afghanistan, because it is filled with culture and it is filled with so many good things other than just like terrorism, I guess. So I feel like Khaled Hosseini does a really good job at highlighting the fact that there are like such good things in like their capital city Kabul, and there's such good things about the Afghan culture rather than just lumping them as like terrorists or like part of the Taliban.
Yeah, I feel like, just my personal opinion, I've noticed that I think there's usually better representation in like music and like literature compared to like TV shows and movies, just because I think books and music, like you can support them easily, like just individual people, but whereas like films, like they cost like way more money, and it's like the film industry, like you hear about like kind of it just being racist and like majorly white, like the Grammys, well, not the Grammys, but like stuff like that.
You mean the Emmys or?
Yeah, sorry, I messed it up. Like
that's fine.
No, yeah, I feel that like definitely, because there's like a lot, like you said, like a
Ooh,
lot of
the Oscars.
Yeah,
Oh
the
my
Oscars.
God.
Yeah, I don't know my name, so my bad.
It's okay. But like I guess, yeah, like you said, like the idea that there's obviously like a lot of backing to like a movie per se, or like a TV show that needs more people support. So like there's more like potentially racist people that would have to be giving their money to like support those projects, whereas like I'd say books, I think nowadays it's like really easy to get like self-published, right? I'm pretty sure, and I think that's like a great thing. And same with music, right? Like I could upload something to Spotify or SoundCloud, right? And make a great track, whatever. But like it's like so much easier. I mean, for me, I ingest like a lot of my like Asian American media through like music. Like you guys have probably heard of like 88 Rising. Like a lot of them are Asian American, I think, or Americanized, I should say. But it's like, whereas To All the Boys I've Loved Before, right? But like I was saying, To All the Boys I Loved Before, right? It's like a Netflix film or whatever, right? And that's got to be, that was like written by, I don't even know who, but like, just like the idea that the project isn't like a self-sustaining kind of thing is like a big contributor to like what representation kind of looks like throughout those platforms.
And then I think kind of the issue that arises from something like that is because, films and TV shows and, kind of higher budget productions are higher budget. That also means that they'll get a lot more press, they'll get a lot more attention. And so the things that people who aren't specifically looking for kind of more diverse media, the things that people will find are those high budget films and productions and TV shows and content like that. And so like it kind of creates like a cycle of where people who kind of don't know or haven't put in the effort to kind of search out these more representative forms of media, what ends up happening is that they don't see that. And then because of that, then they don't look out for more representation. And so it kind of creates this divide between people who are consuming these kinds of media that are portraying Asian Americans in a more representative light. And then people who are kind of just seeing the whitewashed Hollywood version, or the one where the Asian characters are, just tokens that don't have any personality. And so what I feel like we need to see more of, and we're beginning to see it in the East Asians, but really not very much at all outside of East Asia, which I think is a really big problem, is seeing kind of those big budget productions include representation for Asian Americans and portray Asian Americans on screen in a way that is that represents how Asian Americans actually are and isn't, you know, based in stereotype or in kind of racist or unfounded or uninformed biases.
Yeah, I feel that like we're beginning to see like that East Asian representation, but not Asian as a whole. Like, and I feel like in the past years, although it's not like perfect or like ideal representation, I would say like those bad representation movies are still like opening the path. If
Like, do you guys have any other recommendations? Like, I know Aria mentioned.
no, I thought of Avatar.
Okay, low key, high key love
It is, though.
Avatar.
It is pretty good representation. It just doesn't explicitly state like, hey,
Wait,
it's
representation
Asian.
of what? Wait, what
Like
Asian
it's
not even
diverse
like
like Asian
representation of
cultures. Like
the
you know, like in
Fire
each
Island.
nation,
Fire
like,
Nation
you have like the water, like
and Zuko's hair. Okay, his hair.
yeah, like come on,
Wait, what Asian are
it's
they?
good.
They're vague.
Okay, but like
Asian.
watching Avatar as a kid, like I just
Cause that kid looked like me,
automatically
you know?
thought all of them were Asian.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was originally.
never
in
thought they were
English.
white.
I didn't know it was originally in English. I did not know that.
Wait, one of the ice girls, the water girls. Isn't she like one of the native culture?
Katara?
Yeah, Katara.
Yeah, Katara.
Yeah, they're supposed to be like an Inuit
culture.
knockoff.
Yeah.
Oh.
But like, I don't
Wait, so
think
is
they
Avatar not
specified it
Asian?
well.
Oh.
Huh?
I thought
Right?
Avatar was Asian. Don't they go to like
Asian
Bossing's
too.
Bay?
Yeah,
Is that
they
Asian?
yeah,
Maybe
they
it's not?
never sorry.
Is that so out of pocket of me?
Wait. So we bring a good point though, because they never specified that they were Asian or like from minority cultures, but they chose to include those ideas and profit off of it.
Yeah, and they're all white. Wait, it's like an all-white cast. What? There's like a Zuko. No.
I was talking about like the actual cartoon.
Yeah, no.
Are we talking about the movie?
No, this
I'm so
no,
confused.
Oh wait, are we talking about the movie or the
No,
the cartoon?
the animation is voiced
Oh no,
by.
no,
I'm
I
talking
know
about the
writers
animation.
are like white, I think.
Yeah, the voice
But I
actors
don't
are
think,
white,
like,
too.
Was the whole production team like white? Like
I guess so.
I don't know. I feel like they still did a good job in like portraying different Asian cultures that I automatically thought that these people were Asian. But
like,
then
they never
again,
they
It would
never
have been better if they
specified.
explicitly stated that they were Asian.
Yeah. So like they are using the like cultures from minority groups and profiting off of it without mentioning or giving them credit for the culture.
No,
Wait,
but I
but
feel like
isn't
that's
it
almost-
the comics like someone Asian
That's a
made? I'm not
big
really
fat
sure.
realization.
Wait,
No,
now that you
it's like
point that out.
Nickelodeon, right? Oh my
Oh
god.
my god.
But I
Now
feel
that
like
you
that's
point that
almost a
out.
good thing, right? Like,
Yeah, I guess so.
because then you're incorporating these ideas and like, you know, as like an Asian American, like looking at shows like that, then I can like kind of see like, oh, that's like a part of my culture that I can see on TV. And
That's
so like,
true.
you know, they don't need to be like, oh, this is our Asian section. And then they're like, oh,
Yeah, I
here,
feel
here
like
are my Asian cultures. But like they can like, I don't know, I feel like I'd almost rather see more ideas from different cultures. And I think like Avatar also has like non-Asian cultures
I
kind
agree.
of woven through. So it's like, you know, if we could have more media that like kind of takes from different cultures, as long as it's like respectful of the cultures that it's drawing from, then that's almost better than saying like, oh, you know, you can have one Asian show and one Black show and one Latino show. And like,
yeah.
like that seems like so.
No, you're right. I agree. I think like the fact that Avatar wasn't like it probably came out in 2005, right? So I guess I mean like if it came out nowadays, maybe it'd be slammed that like it was an all white cast and all white production team. But you're right. There's like a lot of value in it, and especially because like I don't know, I definitely grew up with that. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I feel like you don't necessarily like have to be Asian to do like to show Asian representation. It's just
Yeah.
often that when you're like white or just not Asian, you don't show good representation.
Exactly. Like you wouldn't understand it,
Yeah, and I feel like Avatar, because it was like catered towards like the younger generation, I feel like, or just kids, I feel like it was pretty good in dealing with like heavy topics.
Yeah.
And then it was
True,
I felt
true.
like I personally felt like represented. I was like, hey, I really like this show because like all these characters are Asian. Like I never even thought for a second that they were white, just because how good like they represented like cultures.
Yep.
So I guess I recommend Avatar.
Okay. Anyone want to wrap it up?
Stay
So now
connected
we're-
with us.
Yeah, so that's the end of our time today. You can follow us at Apex for Youth Ambassadors on Instagram and apexforyouth.org on Google. Google! Did you know? Wait, this is a tangent. Did you know that TikTok was more viewed this year than Google?
Really?
TikTok.com was more viewed than Google.com.
I mean, I can imagine why
I feel
that
like
is.
it makes sense though, because like
Yeah.
wait, TikTok is like short
Google.
loops. Like
Google.
that's true.
Like how often am I like, going through like 100 Google searches in a day?
Yeah,
True.
I definitely see more than 100 TikToks.
That's true. That's
because they're all like 3 seconds.
Okay, that was a really good conversation. We ended off on a bit of a tangent, but thank you guys for listening. You can follow us on Instagram at Apex for Youth Ambassadors, and we have a site, apexforyouth.org. Thank you.